Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. My name is Paul Klingen, and I'm your host. I'm a former advertising professional turned fitness coach where I use my E4 fitness method to help people with their training, nutrition, recovery, and mental performance. You'll hear all the different tips, tricks, and research that I use for myself and my clients to see results in those fields. I'll also bring on experts so that we can deep dive into specific topics. Ultimately, the goal is to help you take your fitness to the next level so that you can live the life that you want to live. So buckle up, take some notes, and let's roll. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. And today I want you guys to meet an awesome man, an awesome leader, and an awesome coach. And what's not known about the podcasting industry, maybe for you guys, you listeners, is that there's a lot of work on the front end, getting people both on the podcast and getting interviewed on podcasts. And I'll get numerous emails of people trying to pitch. It's essentially PR companies or assistants saying, hey, you should interview said person on my podcast. And most of them I don't respond to. And this one caught my eye. And the reason is because Coach Des is such an incredible coach, and his book, which I read, Running Against the Odds, which we'll cover in depth, was such a powerful book for me as a coach, but then also his story. And I wanted to have him on. And so reached back out, had him on the podcast, and a little bit of background on him. Coach Dunham is a youth sports expert with over 2 decades of coaching and teaching experience. He has successfully coached youth athletes and teams in cross-country, track and field, basketball, soccer, baseball, and flag football. And he is the founder of kidselitesports.com. And I'm going to link that in the show notes so that you can check that out. But that's where a lot of his work with these youth athletes has been done. But more notably is his career as a coach. And Coach Dunham has been one of the most prolific coaches in high school cross-country and track and field. He is one of the most decorated high school coaches in the country and boasts national All-Americans, national championships, international titles from short sprints up to distance events, including cross-country. And just to give you an example of how many successful athletes and runners this guy has coached, 100-plus junior Olympic All-Americans in track and field and cross-country, 100-plus high school All-Americans in track and field and cross-country. He has helped coach 68 team state championships, 17 national high school relay championships, and then has won 3 Penn relay championships, which is a big thing that he highlights in the book about when he and his girls team took down the Jamaicans, which is no short feat. And so really excited to have Coach Des on, talk about his book, Running Against the Odds, which you can get. And what I'm going to do is one person that tags the podcast and tags Coach Des and I on social media, I'm going to give away a copy of the book for anyone that listens to the episode, shares, and tags us. So on social media, it's at Coach Des Dunham, COACH, just like regular coach, and then Des, D-E-Z, Dunham, D-U-N-H-A-M. Tag myself as well, Paul_Klingen, and I'll select one lucky person. I'll send him a copy of the book. And without further ado, here we go, Coach Des Dunham. Desmond, thank you so much for coming on to the Mindful Muscle Podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you, connect, and go through your book, Running Against the Odds. A lot of really good lessons in there. And so thank you again for your time.
Hey, thank you for having me, Paul. I love what you're doing, and I love how you're changing lives. And I'm just glad to be here.
Absolutely. So first question I have is, at what point, because a book is a tall order. It's no easy task to go through, like childhood and college and all these stories and remember it and then edit it. So at what point are you like, man, I want to make this a book. I got to tell my story.
Yeah. I think this was probably about a decade ago when I was giving an inspirational talk to some of my runners, and I felt like I really connected with them. And it was a challenging story from my childhood, and it related to running. And I realized that I'm able to really connect to young adults, to my student athletes by showing them that I'm human, that we all go through problems, we all go through issues, and how we handle those challenges is so critical. And so shortly after the talk, one of the young ladies, she stayed back and she said, "You need to write a book." And I was really touched by it, but what she was saying to me is that more people need to hear these stories, not just us. Don't be selfish. And at that point, I thought it was a great idea. I was thinking, all right, who's going to write this book for me? and but the pandemic came around, and I've been wanting to do this for some time, and the pandemic allowed a little bit of extra time, a little bit of more flexibility at home, I should say, and found myself up to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning quite often. And a year and a half into putting the pen to the pad, here we are, running against the odds, is now available.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key things that I noticed as just a thread through the book was adversity, rejection, trauma, and basically how you decided to respond to that. Right. And there's a lot of good lines that you put in the book about like how we go and face those challenges. But even just going and writing a book during the pandemic, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I'll just catch up on Netflix. And I want to write a book. Right. So I think what would you say like your operating system or like your initial thought and approach to rejection, right? Because you have the gentleman of what was the GOD, the gentleman of Drew, right? Yeah. Or like you got cut from your middle school cross country team because of asthma. Yeah. So like, what is it about rejection or adversity that causes in your mind to then say, okay, keep going rather than stopping?
This picture was painted for me when I went out for my high school cross country team. And I just have to say that changed the entire trajectory of my life. My high school coach became a father figure. I learned a lot through the sport of running itself. I think anyone can have, a connection to running or something related, but running became my outlet. It's where I really learned a lot about myself. Running can be very arduous and painful at times, but it could also be very beautiful on certain days when you go out for that run. And I just learned a lot of life lessons through my high school coach. I learned a lot about myself being a distance runner, and anyone who does any type of aerobic sport, you're going to have those times where you're going to be challenging and you're up against yourself. And I think that's one thing that I love about running. You're up against yourself and you have to have that internal fortitude. And I could just see where the more I ran, the more I was a part of the team and program from high school, the more grittier I became. I developed that stick-to-itiveness through running. And then I just started to see this metamorphosis in terms of the more I put in, the less I gave up, the more results that I got. And, and that's just crazy. I mean, we're all running this race of life. And, as soon as we, just continue to use hard moments, failing moments as learning experiences, then that's going to allow us to better who we are. And I'm so thankful that I went out for that high school cross country team because it just impacted me in such a great way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up playing baseball, but I did do middle school cross country. So like your story, it was kind of funny because like middle school.
I think everyone's run cross country at one point in time.
But I did it for basketball so that we could run the suicides and press full court and play that way. But last summer during COVID, I trained for a marathon and ran a marathon. And so many of the things that you're talking about were like things that I really recognize because it really is you against yourself. It's not like a linebacker is trying to tackle you and you got to run through them. It literally is like, what can you convince your mind to do for that next mile? 100%. And I know for me, like I had a couple like mantras that I would say to myself. Is there anything that you use like when you do run into like that little shoot or sting of pain or a hill, right? Or someone's like getting close to you, like any like little one-liners that you'll say to yourself?
I love Invictus. And I often find myself just reciting stanzas of Invictus. One of the points is that I have an unconquerable soul, that I am the master of my fate. I am the I'm the master of my fate and the captain of my soul. And just little things like that reminds me how strong I really am. And I often have to connect my mental side to the physical side. And sometimes you have to be strong enough to hit the override button, on the mental side, so that you can somehow get through whatever challenging moment. I have a love-hate relationship with running, but at the same time, the rewards that you get from it is just it's irreplaceable.
Yeah, I actually stole this from one of my clients a couple years back, but he was talking about how he ran a 5K. I did like couch to 5K program.
Yeah.
Every day he would get up and he's like, all right, I did the impossible yesterday. And I think that, like, when you train for a half, or you train for a marathon, or you run long distance, you really, it is a mental sport so much more than people realize.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
using those little one-liners, like, I love that. I have an incomparable soul. I'm the master of my fate. Those are things that you can then like remind yourself, like, oh, I did the impossible yesterday. Like, I'm the master of my fate. So I love those. And that was like one thing I was like, I want to get like little nuggets out of Coach Dunham. So coming back to like your childhood and the adversity that you faced growing up in Gary, Indiana, losing your friends, father came back from the war, right? And wasn't the same.
Yeah.
I think a couple questions I want to dive into that, but I think the first one that would be just interesting is how your understanding or perspective on mental health has changed, seeing like your father come back and deal with depression and PTSD, and knowing like how big of a role that plays, because you can be mentally strong running a long race, right? But then there's also things that people fight that are kind of invisible, and that's something that I like to really highlight. Both sides of that coin.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point. Where I'm so thankful now that mental health is, it's being uncovered. It's being, there's a lot of tough discussions that are happening around mental health, but there's this also comfortability with sharing the mental stresses and the imbalances that we sometimes are fighting against. When I was younger, it was all about, hey, get tough, suck it up and get through it somehow. And we're not going to talk about that. And I think that we often see that as being guys, a little, more than our female counterparts. But, we all go through it. But that was how I was brought up. And unfortunately, it was a stigma. You were weaker if you, uncovered that you had any mental health issues. And I'm someone who struggled with some things at times, from, depression to just having a lot of lonely moments. And again, I'm just so thankful that I had running as an outlet. It was so therapeutic for me. But everyone doesn't have that outlet. Therapy or help, and I'm just so thankful that now that that we're able to truly share who we are, what we're going through, so that we can have this better balance overall. I mean, it's all about mind, body, and spirit, and if those are, if one of those start to become depleted in your life, I mean, you can be the strongest individual, but if that tank is empty on the emotional or mental side, it's just like a gas tank. I mean, you're going to be running on fumes, and you just can't accomplish much, and you can't feel great about things. I unfortunately went through, some things that, in terms of depression, where I really identified myself as by my career, and it caused some real imbalances, and that's part of running. Part of the reason I wrote Running Against the Odds was to, for those who see me now, they think, oh man, you have it all together. I can't do the things that you've done. And I'm like, okay, you have no idea of the story that I have. And I'm thankful again that running was this outlet. It gave me the endorphins, it gave me the serotonin, it gave me all these happy hormones that help to counter a lot of the stress that I was actually going through. And it was a lot of lonely moments. It was times where I didn't have the confidence in myself. I didn't think there was more for me in life. I'm thinking, all right, I'm just going to coast and just somehow get through and do what I can. And it you kind of, said this and alluded to it earlier. The main person that you're up against is who you were yesterday. And, if you become a little bit better than who you were yesterday, you're winning the race of life. And we just have to remind ourselves. And as you said, we have to say things to ourselves to sometimes give that spark and that jolt. And I'm just so thankful that we are uncovering what a lot of our celebrities, a lot of our top level athletes are going through or have been through. And it's going to make it where it's going to give everyone that permission to address those mental issues or concerns or mental health overall that can help to bring a lot more happiness in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Simone Biles was a great example, or a great recent example, right? Of on that biggest stage of one of the biggest athletes of all time. There was a couple things that you touched on there. One was like keeping your cup full, right? And as you're drinking a cup of water, I want to put a pin in that because I want to come back to that. But one of the paragraphs that I found really interesting was when you were talking about your childhood, and you said, yeah, but too many of us move out of the hood and never come back. We got to be the ones to bring up the next generation. How can we do that if we get ours and then move out to the suburbs and never reach back? Right. And I found that super powerful because they're like, with your story being from Gary, Indiana, right? And losing your friends and the adversity that you've had to go through, in being able to share your story, then people can see that consanguinity, like, oh, he's like me. And now they believe that it's possible to get out of that. How much of that is like, obviously you're doing that, but how much of that is, something that's really important? I guess for me, it's like, it's so important to recognize that like everyone is inspiring to someone else. So just talk about that a little bit, because you might be the one person that can give someone the permission to change their situation.
Right. You're absolutely right. I want to give others the permission to shine. I would love to, you come from, Gary was, it was a tale of two cities where I absolutely love my family. I love my childhood friends. And Paul, the one thing is, everyone on the face of this earth wants to have love, peace, and happiness. And most of all, they want to have an opportunity to have a future. And it's unfortunate that you could be born in a zip code, and that could determine the school that you attend and the educational resources that you have. And so your path in life is already skewed a bit because of, if you're born, unfortunately, in a lower socioeconomic zip code area, city, and so there's some unfairness that we all go through in life in some form or fashion, and I just live every day to try to equal the playing field, and then of course it has to start with my home city, but I do a lot here in Washington D.C. I'm trying to touch every life and leave my mark and legacy and plant seeds so that future generations can have better opportunities and better themselves. And I think that this book is going to have a wide reach, but if I just change one life, with someone who reads this book, that's going to be satisfying for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about that. Just you highlighted systemic racism, or like kind of hints at it through different parts in the book. And, you had the Hartford Invitational, or the Hartford Invitation, right? Where you're it's not normal to see a black coach in an all black team. And then you talked about, getting passed up for the Nike Team Nationals. And then you had that kind of crazy turn of events where you're able to go. Yeah. But what was it like 20 years ago? What have you seen change, and what still needs to change to give people that equal opportunity?
That's a great question. And the one thing is that, my plea to everyone is that, you don't judge a book by its cover. We're all human beings, and again, everyone deserves an opportunity. Everyone wants to be safe. Everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to have a future and be able to take care of their very own family. And now that I even have kids, my concern isn't as much with myself as now with my own kids. I have a 14 and 16-year-old, and I do know that my wife, she gets on me quite a bit. Sometimes it gets a bit late. I go out for a run, and I don't jog, I run, and she's fearful that that I'm on the streets at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, running, and that because I have come across situations where I have 3 degrees, and I've accomplished a lot as a coach, as an entrepreneur, but unfortunately, there could just be a blip of a moment where there's some profiling, and which I've experienced a lot of that, unfortunately, because I wear a lot of athletic clothes, and some of the athletic clothes has a hoodie on it, and I can tell the difference when people know me as Coach Des, the renowned coach and entrepreneur, and then someone who doesn't know my resume see me in athletic clothes, and I could just be running to the local 7-Eleven or local store, and it's just sometimes it's a different feel, and it's not a great feeling at all. And so we still have those things that exist, and but even just going back to Gary, which was a big steel city, and it went under with this competition overseas, and here it was, you had a lot of African Americans to migrate to Gary, and it was a great idea when we were able to help America with the steel industry. But then when it started to plummet, there were no resources or stimulus packages, or what started to happen, they actually started to rezone Gary and draw the lines a lot tighter in Gary, so that there could create the suburbs of Gary, and unfortunately a lot of African Americans got packed into a tight city where the resources went down, the educational levels went down, the crime went up, the homicide. We were the homicide capital of the U.S. and it just led to a lot of unfortunate events. Even the 3 guys that I lost as childhood friends, these were great guys. They were not tied to gangs. They were not, tied to drugs. Just wrong place at the wrong time, with the amount of violence that existed in Gary, that they found themselves into a situation that they couldn't get out of. And so those are the things that when you ask, what about the connection and giving back, and it's my due diligence. I feel like I was super blessed. I didn't have this roadmap when I was in 7th and 8th grade. I knew I wanted to be happy. I knew I wanted to do something special with my life. I didn't know exactly what that was, and I'm just thankful that I had the right people to come along the way that helped me with that roadmap. And unfortunately, some of us are not privy to that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that that was a question that your publicist mentioned, like talking about, and some you talked about in the book, and bringing that up on this podcast and highlighting it, and then being able to make changes, because you should be able to go for a run and wear a hoodie as a runner, right? Or think about like your kids, like they need to go for a run, they got to run 5 miles, like that should not be something that they got to worry about. They're practicing themselves. And even just the stuff about Gary, Indiana, that was background that I didn't know. I haven't been to Gary, Indiana outside of just driving through it. But unless that story is told and like those details are told, people just think, oh, Gary, Indiana, like it's a dangerous place. Right.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Well, why? And, to your point, it's like you're giving back and you're doing so much to that. And that's, I want to pull that pin out of that point about keeping your cup full, right? Because you've got so many people that you're helping, that you are looking out for, right? Well, there's the crazy story of like having your car towed. It's like, I got to get these kids. I got to take care of these kids. So like, how do you balance that? And has that changed and evolved towards like, man, like I'm just going to keep pouring into these kids, knowing that you got to also keep your cup full and your family's cup full as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a struggle at times, and I do. I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I still go back to running. Even sometimes I'll come in the house and I'm a little cranky, and my wife will say, "Hey, you need to go work out. You need to go for a run," because I'm a totally different person, and I just can't emphasize enough. I mean, we all need that outlet that's going to just take some of that stress off and give us that mental and physical balance. But I have a very supportive team of folks around me. I have a great team with my camp business. I have a great team even with launching this book, a marketing team, a social media team. And I think that's so key that we all need to have the right people around us. Is it still a struggle with balancing things? I mean, of course, sometimes, it's hard for me to turn it off. And even when I'm physically at home, I want to make sure that I'm present at home and not thinking about other things that I need to do. And I really don't sleep at all. So the one thing that I have given up is trying to get 8 hours of sleep. And I know that's not the most healthy thing, but if I can get 5 or 6 hours, because I just truly believe that I'm so blessed, and I'm extremely happy with all the things that I'm able to do. And I can't emphasize that enough too. When you find your passion, you're not working a day of your life. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some hard work involved, but it's hard work that you don't mind doing. And it's a big difference from hard work when you don't enjoy what you're doing. And that definitely triggers, a lot more stress and anxiety than when it's the things that you love to do. So I don't mind the hustle and bustle. I also try to recruit others to be a part of the journey. I don't believe in doing it alone. When you have the right people around you, a right team of folks around you, you can inspire them to see your mission because, teamwork makes the dream work. And that's in any and everything that we do. And that's why I'm always auditing my circle to make sure that I have a lot of positive energy in that circle. And we have to do that. We got to audit our circles with our friends and family and work coworkers. But I'm very blessed with the people who have been a part of my journey, and they also have the mission to want to make change. We got to recruit as many people as possible. I mean, that's what you're doing here. You're inspiring people to be better for themselves, and you're inspiring people to be better for other people. And this world could be a much better place if we all are chipping in to make someone else's life better.
Yeah, I really liked the point that you talked about, like auditing your team, right? Because any athlete can understand like how valuable it is to have a locker room of people that are on their grind. And you got you got the captains that are like asking more of people. You got the rookies that you're mentoring. Right. That's keeping you kind of in alignment with what you're saying you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's huge. And just the point of having a passion and having a purpose. And I think of like it's hard to swim upriver. It's much easier to swim like if a river's going in the direction you want to go. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And it's still hard work, but you're getting there so much easier and quicker. And there's an interesting session in the book where you went to Africa with Step Africa.
Yeah.
So I want you to just talk about that a little bit and just how that kind of I think it sounds like there was a lot of things like your high school coach, just your life experiences that kind of groomed you for coaching, but what role did that play in helping you discover your purpose and your passion?
Well, I went to South Africa where I was experiencing a mild depression. I had run in my last collegiate conference championship race, and I was slated as being a front runner, potential winner of the race, but even more so, if I score 1, 2, or 3 points, it really propels our team to have a shot at the championship title. And at that time, I mean, it was a brotherhood. It was where I was willing to do any and everything. I was a team captain. And then about 2 weeks before the championships, I developed bronchitis. And, I go into this emergency room, I get the diagnosis. The doctor says, unfortunately, your season is over. There's no way you're going to be ready in 2 weeks. I mean, you're probably, even if it was 3 or 4 weeks, you're not even close. And somehow I didn't take that diagnosis back to my college coach. He just, thought it was a bad cold, and I, told him I had it, and I was going to make sure that I was healthy and ready to run. And so I just kind of, did a lot of treatment, medication, dibble and dabbled in some of the workouts, and it was a struggle. But when that day came for me to run and toe the line with my teammates, there was no way that I was going to hold back, and started off the race 6.2 miles in a great position. By the time I got to mile 2, I'm like, oh boy. And it was the most painful race that I had ever run. Not able to breathe at all the last 3+ miles. And all I could remember was just fading, back, and then next thing you know, I wake up on the back of an ambulance. I was able to complete the race. I was 17th, I believe, overall, and I was running over 100 miles a week prior to that. All summer. I was really revved up, geared up. Running was my life, and so were my teammates. And so after I, ended up on the back of this ambulance, I get a diagnosis later on that I developed pneumonia. And so there's the stress from putting in the cold weather with the bronchitis. This is what the doctor, warned me about. And so needless to say that, I was down and out for some time. And I was really bitter about that. And I was really upset. And I'm thinking, here it was. I've worked my tail off, why me? And I fell into this sunken place. I didn't run. I didn't want to run. And it was months before I would actually, put those trainers back on. And it wasn't until I went to South Africa, where we went there shortly after the apartheid ended, and we spent a lot of time in the Soweto townships. And I'll never forget, when I stepped out of the van and I'm looking around and I'm like, holy, this is where people live. These homes were 200, 300, 400 square feet, 400, that's given a little bit more probably space than what was there. But the roofs of the homes, had holes in them where if it rained outside, that water was coming into the home. The floors were made of dirt and rocks and glass and gravel, and it was one of the most unfortunate things that I had ever witnessed in my life. And this was an entire community of folks that were forced into this way of life. And so it really made me look back to Gary. I'm thinking, wow, Gary is eons above where the Soweto townships are. And then here it is. And I had to call myself out on it. I'm literally pouting that I didn't place in a championship race, and I had to give myself a little bit of leadway, and just give myself, I was hard on myself, and I had to, really back up to just look at everything from a different lens. And here it is in the Soweto Township, kids were not even able to play organized sports. They weren't able to run in their community with freedom. They were not able to take any of their talents and garner scholarships, and unless there was just an exception to a kid having a pathway from them somehow getting outside of the township. And so some of the things that I was bitter about, I realized that I was just taking a lot of things for granted. And it was one of the most humble experiences that I had ever had in my entire life. And, we don't control where we're born. We don't control who we're born to and where we're born. We are, ordained to, and we're put into these blissful situations. And I really just began to reflect on just the bigger picture of life. And this was a time where I was always a great teammate. I was always someone dependable, but this really told me that it's not about me, that we're put on this earth to make life better for everyone, and that I'm responsible for making life better for this, part of this, continent that has these unfortunate events that are taking place, and we all have to own it. We don't want to sometimes acknowledge those things, because it gives us a funny feeling that life unfortunately can't be the same for everyone. And so it was a huge moment of reflection, and I'm thankful for being able to experience it, and it was life-changing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it. And a question, do you have any other plans? Like, I know you've got a bunch of things going on right now, but like anything to like go back? Have you gone back since then? Is there anything kind of related to that you're thinking about picking up and doing again?
Yeah, so I think there was a couple of things, and I've been there twice. Now my goal is to take my kids there. I was very fortunate to take my son to the Dominican Republic, where we were able to spend some time in Consuelo, where they produce some of the top baseball players. I think the most professional baseball players in a 5-mile radius. They're producing more than any other, small segment of a 5-mile radius anywhere in the world. But this is also a city that doesn't have clean running water. One of the jobs that everyone fights over to try to provide for their family is cutting down, sugar cane, and working the sugar cane fields. And my son learned that, that there are adults who are getting paid $25 a month, to take care of their families. My son was able to see that there were kids that were rotating a third of the year to attend school on these 4-month cycles. And so those are things that are just eye openers. I mean, not only is it happening in developing countries across the world, but it's also happening in the United States. And we just have to choose to to want to get entrenched with programs and in particular areas where unfortunately kids are just born into these situations. But I think that my wife just told me, don't take on another project, but I think something that's down the line is a Cradle to College program. I think that one of the major struggles that we have is the fact that we don't have enough early childhood education. We keep this perpetual cycle where those who are from low socioeconomic homes, kids are hearing 30,000 less words by the time they're 3 years old because their parents aren't educated, and quite often, the circle of friends and family, also reflect that same educational levels. And until we start to interrupt those educational levels at age 2 years old and above, that we're kids are going to struggle in school. And when you're struggling in school and you get a grade level behind in reading, I mean, how does school stay fun for you? And then how do you stay connected? And there's a lot of glowing statistics that third grade will tell you if a kid has a great percentage of finishing school or if they are going to have some challenges. And we recognize these things, but we rather, right now in America, we rather put more money towards the prison system than we will towards the educational system. And we can disrupt a lot of poverty. We can definitely even the playing fields and just make this a much stronger company, much stronger America if we are willing to invest in those earlier childhood educational programs.
Yeah, that's huge. I had no idea just those two numbers, that third grade is really kind of like an inflection point in that. Well, you said 2 years old, 30,000 less words?
3 years old.
3 years old. Okay. 3 years old. But it's like, you're totally right. That's preventative measures that you can take towards like, you're no longer needing to fix the symptom, which is so much more expensive. That's
much more expensive
from a health standpoint, right? You can see how, it's like diet and exercise. Like, so education is so huge. So I love that. And we'll be super excited to see like when that comes up in different ways to support that. I think the last couple questions I'd have is just the one I want to touch on. I found it funny that your college coach, Coach Moultrie, William Moultrie, is that the right say? So he wears a cowboy hat. So I'm just like picturing some guy in a cowboy hat on a track field. It actually Texas guy. It actually gave me an idea that I think would be like a funny, like if two MLB teams ever wore cowboy hats as like a game, right? It's just like that would be such a funny thing to see. Like they got like their brim down and it's like a standoff. Anyway, total side note.
I love it.
But so you went to Howard, right? And then joined Alpha Fraternity, which like that was eye-opening as well, where it's like Stan Verrett, Stuart Scott, Jesse Owens, like all the Martin Luther King Jr., all these people that were part of that. So talk about that a little bit and just the value of that brotherhood and that community and what you learned, at Howard as a collegiate athlete.
Yeah. So, I'm very fortunate. One of the struggles, and even being from Gary, with it being a predominantly African-American community, was the simple fact that there's no ties in our educational curriculum to our culture. We were brought over here, and one of the first things was the fact that we have been disconnected from our culture. And to be honest, you don't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And and I feel like as a race that we have really struggled, where we're like that boat in the middle of the ocean without a rudder, without any clear direction of. And your culture is something that it makes you proud, it makes you prideful, and that's what I was able to get when I got to Howard, where I had so much more of an appreciation for who I was. And my fraternity really helped to facilitate that. And developing more pride for myself, it made me develop more love for all mankind. And there's the struggle where, again, going back to education, but I mean, if you're confused and you don't know who you are and you're struggling in school and you're 14, 15, 16 years old and you're thinking, man, I mean, I'm graduating when I'm 18 and what else am I going to do? I mean, it leaves a person hopeless and helpless in many ways and confused. And so, I mean, I am thankful that that was interrupted for me with my high school coach, but getting to Howard, it really poured into me in terms of being able to realize and recognize who I am as an African American male. And then that just fueled me to be the best version of myself. And now because of that, it gives me just this extra jolt to just want to make everyone's life better around me and to give everyone this feeling that I have. I'm so I do take time to make sure that I focus on helping my community, African American community, but anyone who knows me, I mean, any kid from any background can always count on me, and I love just the teams I've been able to coach. I mean, it's a huge melting pot of just all backgrounds. All the teams I've ever coached, it represents the community, the school. One of the things that I love when I just recently got to St. John's was the cross country team was this homogenous, all white cross country team or predominantly white. The track team was homogenous and predominantly all Black. And I'm like, okay, something's not right here. And I'm like, this is why you haven't won a championship either. Because I mean, here it is that you have all of this talent, you have, you have all this potential, but then there's all these barriers up, and there's a lot of uncomfortability with crossing certain lines, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna just have a lot of discussions here, and so fast forward, later we had 20 runners on the team. We have 100 plus runners now from all backgrounds, and I mean we're a model team of how a team should reflect diversity. But I mean, it goes beyond just being a team. We want to be a model for life, that if we plan on making our community strong, our society strong, keeping America strong, that we have to all work together on the same team. And that sometimes means that we're going to have tough conversations and getting to know one another. And I think those are fine. Let's grow together. And I think we both know that the true the true measure of any relationship is, can you actually get through the tough moments? It's not the great moments. and when you do get through the tough moments, those are growing moments that's going to strengthen the relationships. And I am really happy that some things are being addressed and uncovered. And I'm just hoping that everyone can continue to have, tough conversations with keeping an open mind and wanting to win this together, because it doesn't do any good if one side wins and the other side loses. We lose as a team. That, a win plus a loss equals a loss. And if we are not willing to, do some things to really work together, then it's going to be a struggle. And I don't want to leave this world with not doing my part to try to, to make things better and to get through this struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing I really loved out of that is the more love for self equals more love for all mankind. And that's something that you found as you got more tied to like your history, your past, your identity. And it just the visual that comes to mind for me is like if your boat's good, right? If you feel
Yeah.
secure in your boat,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can reach out and pull other
Yeah.
people out of the water,
What? Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? But if your
Yeah.
boat's sinking
I like
and you're
that.
not
Yeah.
secure,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
two people are
Yeah.
drowning, or you're not able to actually
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
someone. And so I think that's like, it's an interesting dichotomy where it's like, right, you have like who you are and being proud of who you are, right? And you have that tribe, but then you also have the ability to cross and have that diversity
Oh
and have
yeah.
that conversation, but it's not coming from a place
Oh
of
yeah.
like fear or not knowing who you are, because you're secure, so you can go and have that uncomfortable conversation.
100%. Yes. And the unfortunate thing, misery loves company. So when you're miserable with yourself, unfortunately, you're going to pull other people down with you. And that's why we see some of the statistics that we see today. And we also have to be careful that, of letting those people in our circle as well, because I mean, they'll tug away at us. And next thing you know, you're drained and, you're making decisions that doesn't reflect who you are and your character. But I love the boat analogy. That's spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wrap this up, I want to give you the opportunity not only to promote the book, but anything else you're doing. The Kids Elite Sports, that's an awesome program that you got going, helping over 80 or 800 youths, training
Yeah.
a lot of different college counselors. So like it's kind of like on your plate now? Obviously the book, Running Against Odds, I want people
Yeah.
to check it out, but anything else that you want to promote, talk about that's going on for you?
Yeah. Well, the Running Against the Odds, we also have a teacher's guide with it, and that's free on my website. We would love to see this land in ELA classes so that students can write their own personal narrative, and just want to see our youth being able to reflect on who they are. And a lot of times, I mean, I was hiding a lot of the challenges that I was going through at home, and a lot of my friends and family, they're surprised as they got some of the advanced readings. And so I want to let young folks know that they're not alone. And again, we put together a teacher's guide, has robust SAT words throughout the book that are tier 2 SAT words. And so I would be ecstatic to find this to be required reading for your upper middle school and high school students. Kids Elite Sports, I want to just live in the sports and youth world, and I always trying to figure out, okay, how can I, stay as an entrepreneur and keep the connective tissue with everything that I do, and so one thing that I did realize when my kids were younger, that specialization was I mean, there was too much specialization in sports, and sports were just way too stressful, and came up with this model of diversification versus specialization for anyone who's 12 and under. And so Kids Elite started about 8 years ago. We started with 10 campers and we finished with 20. We started with 10 campers and I hired 25 counselors. So we had the formula was off, but when you fast forward, I think this past summer with 4 sites, we've actually have close to 1,000 campers, and because it has grown where kids really want to play sports, we keep the competition levels at a semi-competitive level. But the main thing is we're teaching skills, and these are transferable skills. You're a baseball player, Paul, and you can appreciate it. So we take those baseball players, we do a lot of Frisbee with them, and you can catch a Frisbee, you can catch a baseball. And so we do a lot of fun, neat things intentionally. And the main thing is we're also using those moments to teach, just life lessons. And ELITE stands for effort, leadership, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. And so super happy, super proud of what we've evolved to, able to train our young adults to be great counselors, and that gives them a great foundation as they move into their careers. And so it's been a dream come true building Kids Elite. We're in the franchise mode now. So we're looking to expand outside the DMV area. And as long as it doesn't get in the way of my coaching, I'm all good. So that's all I have.
That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely link to that and shoot that over to some people that I've either had on the podcast or clients or people that I know that are teachers and coaches and whatnot. Two really tough questions. I'll give you the harder one first.
Okay.
You finish a really long run. We'll call it a 2-hour run, and you are starving. What is your go-to meal that you gotta have?
All right. That's easy. That's easy. I would say a PB&J, peanut butter and jelly.
Nice.
Keep it simple. You're going to get the carbs, and then, you want to always try to keep a 4-to-1 recovery ratio between carbs and protein. And I think that's the easiest on 100% whole wheat bread. That's going to replenish it's easy to prepare. You can have it within that 30-minute window. The sooner you consume it after that depleting workout, it replenishes those storages exponentially. So the first thing is, don't wait until after that 60-minute, window. PB&J is also great where, it is easy to pack it up. If you, go do your run and finish at a different point, that you can becomes easy accessible. It's okay if it gets a little warm and mushy. That's my go-to.
I love that. I grew up in high school. I would always have 5 or 6 in my backpack. Yeah. Because you're playing it 3-sport athlete, you're going all day, and it's you're just cranking them out. And you mix it up with a little peach or raspberry or blueberry, strawberry. That way you get the variety in there. But definitely a good choice. And then the other one is, dead or alive, even fiction or nonfiction. If you could sit down with anyone, coach, someone from Invictus, who'd you sit down with and just have a conversation, have a dinner, a nice PB&J?
That's so easy. It'll be Malcolm Gladwell, who also was a runner himself. And before I even started writing my book, I did a master class with Malcolm Gladwell, and I say with him, he was right here with me. But he's just one of the most fascinating writers that I am able to relate to, and his creativity. And again, he was also a runner, so he uses a lot of running analogies in his writing. And then Outliers was a book that I really felt that in this world of sports, reading Outliers, he talks about these 10,000 hours of mastery to become this expert. And it really had me to dig in, okay, what's out there that I can be passionate about, that I have the expertise in, and I can help others. And that's where, again, we started with the camp. And I'm maybe I don't have enough experience. And then here it is, we're busting at the seams now, where we're just growing to multiple sites. And so I just love the combination of his creative writing, as well as him being just, straightforward with, analysis and statistics and the amount of science that supports his writing as well.
Yeah. That Outliers book is one that I've had a couple people recommend. I need to check that out as soon as possible, because that's on the short list. Nice. But Desmond, thank you so much for the time, man, and love the wisdom and the thoughts, and look forward to just connecting and continuing to, help the book grow and help, Kids Elite Sports grow and everything else.
Thanks so much, Paul. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Before I let you go, just want to say thank you so much for listening to the Mindful Muscle podcast. Thank you for listening to Coach Dez's story and the interview about him, his book, and everything that he does through kidselitesports.com and the work that he does with high school athletes and many other athletes as well. And as always, if you found value in the show, be sure and both tag Coach Des Dunham and I on social media. Let others know about the podcast. And if you would, leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Help me continue to grow the podcast and get a good rating so that people see it and like, all right, I should check out this podcast. One last little note. We've got the E4 Fit method dialed in. So if you are interested in seeing a complete body transformation from a weight loss standpoint, building a little bit of muscle, or completely changing your physique, the E4 Fit method is going to be for you. We're going to dial in your training and exercise, your nutrition, your recovery, which is one of the most underlooked part of anything fitness related, both how the metabolism and the nervous system recovers. And then we're going to dial in mental performance and mindfulness. And so when we bring those 4 elements together in a balanced and aligned way, it's going to make your goals so much more, not effortless, because it's always going to take work, but when you align things, you get rid of the friction. And that's what we're going to do for you. So be sure to go to elementalcoachingproject.com, check that out. You can sign up for the free Facebook groups. I got a 5-day course for one of the programs to check it out, but I'll catch you guys next time. Otherwise, either in one of those groups, we'll have a conversation, or I'll catch you on the Mindful Muscle podcast next time. Take care.